I just had like a super panic attack in the supermarket. And then I went home and just fought anxiety and panic for 3 or 4 weeks after that. Just terrible, unrelenting anxiety. That was my turning point, my pivot point.
Welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I'm Nick Michael, the podcast about moments of change and transformation, the disruptions that arrive uninvited and demand we reconsider everything we thought was working. Sometimes a pivot point looks like opportunity, sometimes it looks like loss, and sometimes it looks like the growing distance between who we are and who we were expected to be. Pivot points rarely announce themselves clearly. They show up as tension we've learned to normalize, as questions we've been postponing, as a quiet but persistent voice inside us saying, this can no longer continue as it is. My guest today is Don Munro, an actor, model, and singer. But long before Don stepped into creative work that allowed him to be seen, he lived in a world where being seen felt dangerous. His pivot point didn't arrive as clarity or inspiration, it arrived as crisis, the kind that forces a reckoning between survival and authenticity. Don's story is about what happens when the cost of hiding finally exceeds the cost of being known. It's about dismantling inherited narratives that were never truly yours. It's about the slow, unglamorous work of reclaiming your own voice after spending years learning to silence it. This is a conversation about courage, not the loud kind, but the quiet, daily kind that chooses honesty over comfort, integrity over approval, and self-authorship over an inherited script. This is a Pivot Point story. Don, welcome to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. Tell us about a pivot that you'd like to share with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. So my pivot point, the biggest one that I think led me to where I am today, was caused by panic and anxiety. I was living alone in an apartment in the suburbs, and I was not in any relationships or anything. As a matter of fact, I had pretty much closed off any sort of romance or intimacy because I was desperately afraid that I was gay. And it sounds a little ridiculous to me now to say I was afraid that I was gay. But back then, that's just how I felt. It was mostly because of my upbringing. I was raised Catholic, Irish Catholic. They're pretty severe. And I was taught that it was just not acceptable to be gay. It was like being a communist, back in the day. And so I grew up with that knowledge, but I had these feelings inside of me that I couldn't reconcile that with. And so for me, the best way to do that was to suppress those feelings that I had. I really, I lived a very oppressed, quiet life, just hoping to not be noticed. Because if people got to know me too well, they would find out that why aren't you dating, and how come you're not married yet? And it would lead to all those questions. The turning point was one day I was in the supermarket and I saw this man there and I was attracted to him. And right before that, I had been going through some really difficult times at work and I was very stressed. I just had I just had this sudden moment of realization. I guess I'm gay. I'm this many years old and this is not a phase anymore. I just had like a super panic attack in the supermarket. And then I went home and just fought anxiety and panic for 3 or 4 weeks after that. Just terrible, unrelenting anxiety. That was my turning point, my pivot point.
So tell us a little bit about what it was like for you in your body, in your emotions, for that to strike you and how that impacted you.
So for me, I went through that. My body I had the flight response. So I was filled with this very, these waves of energy, nervous energy, and which I couldn't, no amount of task could dispel all of that. And it wasn't a matter of dispelling it because that was backed up by sort of like, obsessive thinking about my truth, and which I was afraid of. And so it's not something that I could push aside. I tried to push it aside, and it, it may have worked for a few hours at a time or even a day or two at a time. But my body was under constant assault from anxiety attacks. And the only time that I really had relief from that was at night. And I think that was because I didn't have to work anymore and I could just sort of crawl up on the couch and just take care of myself. So, but then first thing in the morning when I opened my eyes, it was, and I wasn't sleeping well. It was tough.
So going back, how long had you been negotiating in your mind with yourself?
So I would say it all started preteen, my preteen years, maybe 11 or 12. And I had expressed that I was attracted to other boys, mostly to my mom. She kept saying, this is a stage. This is a stage, a phase you're going through, and you'll like girls someday. It's a sin. You can't do that anyway. It's a sin. It was the main contact that I went to whenever I felt overwhelmed by worry about it. And there was always that reassuring message that it was something that would go away. And so I guess that's where I learned to negotiate it away. But then when I moved out, when I was living by myself, I developed a very, talent at just suppressing it and trying not to feel anything. And which is how I lived a good part of my life. It seems terrible now to think about it, but it was a good, for 15 years. Seems like such a waste of time now, but
So how do you view the panic attack now? As a collapse or as a form of truth telling from the body?
it was definitely time to change. It was my body and my mind telling me, this is your truth. You're gay. It's not, of course, I didn't know. If I knew at the time that it wasn't a big deal, that it's just a form of sexuality, I didn't know that. So it was the anxiety, the panic attacks, as terrible as they were the prompt. They were the change that had been coming for many, many years that I just kept putting off.
Now, you refer to it as a panic attack back then. Were you going through similar panic type of experiences throughout your life, or was that
Oh, yeah,
what made? Yeah, okay. So
sure.
tell us about how suppressing and compartmentalizing, however you want to put it, detaching.
I think that I compartmentalized. I substituted the need for intimacy with other things. And, that worked for a while, I guess. But I think my panic attacks at an earlier age I had someone older than me and like a parent figure to tell me that it's okay. You can get over it. It's just something that will pass. And I was in therapy as a child. And I think my earliest therapist that I went to was when I was like 5. I went to a child psychologist. I guess I was I was just exhibiting that I was an anxious child. And then as a teenager, I went into therapy too. And I did discuss my sexuality with my therapist as a teenager. And I think my therapists treaded very lightly with it at that age because they knew that it might be, I wouldn't get the support that I needed for the work that I was doing, for any kind of acceptance work that I was doing in therapy at home. So I think they do that.
So that brings me to really ask you then, do you think that was a sign of the time for therapists? Or do you think how do you think that would have been differently now played out?
I think now,
Because I'm trying to figure out with
yeah,
people now listening
sure,
and clinicians now listening
sure,
and embracing, it's very different. So
yeah.
I'm just curious about, as a youngster, you're bringing this to your therapist and then you're sensing from them. Yeah.
And there was a point, I may have been 15 or 16. I was dating a girl and I knew that I wasn't 100% interested in having a girlfriend. I was on some level attracted to her. And my therapist at the time said to me, and I remember saying to her, well, what if I'm gay? What if I'm gay? And she said, well, what if you are gay? What would be wrong with that?
Right. And
And
how is that
everything
for
that
you
she was,
hearing that? Right.
yeah, everything that she was trying to get through to me was, I knew that at home was completely unacceptable. So even though there was someone telling me that it would be okay, she wasn't my parent figure. She wasn't someone that I had to live with and be accepted by 100%, 24/7. So I stopped going to her after that. So it was really, there was an effort there, but I wasn't, that wasn't something I could support at home. But today I think that, I mean, I'm not a therapist, but today I think just based on the kind of society that we have become since then, even though there's still homophobia and transphobia, more so now, with this government that live in, we live
Right.
under. I think any therapist would say this is a normal part of human sexuality. The human experience. You can look back thousands of years and read same-sex relationships and arrangements, etc. So it's not new. Relax, chill.
So thinking back now, if you think back to back then as a teenager, as a youngster, and as you are right now, what would you say differently to that younger self besides just it's going to be okay? What advice would you give to that part of you?
I think that I would encourage my younger self to take a chance and outside of your immediate family unit. And, I went to Catholic school, so it wasn't like something I could even go to the library and look up, but go outside of your immediate universe there and seek help and do research on your own. You can support yourself to do that. Because you will discover that whatever it is you're dealing with, there's more support for you if you're not if you're not already in a loving or supportive environment at home. There's more knowledge, support, resources outside of your immediate world. Go seek it because, even though it might be a little scary, you'll be happier.
So part of you was sensing something and remaining quiet, keeping it a secret. What were you most worried would happen for you?
I was worried that I would be rejected, that I
Yeah.
wouldn't be loved anymore. My mom and my dad wouldn't love me, and my friends would reject me, and I would have to go like on my own somewhere. That was very scary stuff when you're 13, 14, 15.
And as you're looking back now, what did staying quiet, keeping it a secret, not revealing yourself, what did you notice that you could say now impacted you in a way back then in your behavior, in your thinking, in your feelings? What do you notice now looking back? This is what it caused me to feel like or act like or be like.
I think keeping it a secret, not sharing with my closest friends and family members that this is who I think I am, it caused me or encouraged me to be somewhat of a loner and to avoid relationships, obviously romantic relationships, but also just having really close friends and sharing everything about myself with those. Because I was always afraid of the question, well, why aren't you dating? How come you're not married? How come you don't have children? So for me, I didn't want anyone to ask me that or to find that out. I kept myself hidden. Hidden is a good word. I hid myself.
Did it include being avoidant
Oh yeah,
and
I
not
would avoid.
forthcoming? Yeah. And
Yeah, I would avoid
yeah.
party, social situations where I felt were too intimate. Like it was a big party, that was one thing. They could move around to different people. But if it was like a small dinner with 3 or 4 people, that was an issue for me. I tried to avoid those things. It got so bad that it was even with cousins and family members that I didn't want to be around anymore. And I grew up in a very tight-knit family. There were 8 of us, 8 kids, and my parents had 8 children. So, and lots of cousins. It was a type of family where we would all gather on all the holidays, and there were times where I just wanted to be alone. It was safer to be alone. I felt safer. And I think when I think of my life now, I'm almost fearless. I mean, I'm pretty fearless. I mean, I have no problem meeting new people. I get up on stage all the time and show people who I am. I sing, I act.
You found your voice, is what you're saying,
Yeah, yeah,
and embraced who you are.
yeah, and that's I think my driving force. And as an artist, I want to show people who I am because I think I have a great personality. I have a good voice. I'm a good actor, and but just beyond those things, I want them to. I'm okay with being me, so I want to share that. I want to share who I am with people, and I want to get to know them too. It's a two-way street. I'm not afraid to find out who people are anymore. You know, so
Major shift,
big shift,
and
and
it impacted personally, professionally,
yes,
probably spiritually.
yes, I would say that I'm not. I used to be very religious, and I think I relied on my religious beliefs and practices to help me push away fear. But now I think I'm more spiritual than religious now, and
That's what I was going
I,
to ask you.
I like to think I can connect with God and nature and even other religions. I'm very curious about other religions, and I try to find friends from all different religions. You know, what we all have in common is a desire to experience God, but I don't think it's in dogma or
Right.
rituals. I think it's in people. I think it's in nature. I think it's in ourselves.
You're listening to Pivot Point Strategy for Change. If today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It truly helps others find the show and supports the work we're doing here. You can find Pivot Point Strategy for Change on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like a deeper dive into the work we explore on the show, I invite you to visit my Substack page where I share in-depth articles and reflections. So how do you reconcile spirituality with the harm inflicted through the religious messaging while growing up?
Yeah, I don't, I'm a Christian. I don't think Jesus, if you read the New Testament or if you read works about Jesus written by authors, I don't think there wasn't condemnation of, of, of people. And I think that's because we're God's creatures. So if you look at the original teachings of Jesus, he was here to teach us how to love, not how to hate. And he spent a lot of time with people who were rejected by his society at the time, tax collectors, lepers, divorced women, sex workers. There's a reason why he spent time with them, because he wanted to tell them that God loved them too.
Well said. Did reclaiming your faith require redefining who or what God is to you then?
Yes. Yeah. I thought that back then, it's sort of a trite phrase now to pray the gay way, but that's kind of really what I did. I prayed that I would be free of anxiety, but the anxiety came from denying who I was. When I was really young, a really young teenager, I would pray that I wouldn't be gay. But I don't, I don't think at all that there's not one part of me that thinks God doesn't like me because of my sexuality. I mean, if it's a part of the human story, how could it be a sin? If it's between two consenting adults and it's part of the human story, then it's not a sin. I don't believe that.
How did owning your identity then unlock your courage to step into acting and singing and performing now? How did that happen?
It was almost like a dam broke, but it wasn't a dam like a full breakage of a dam, like if there's an earthquake and a dam collapses and the water rushes through. Little
Right.
leaks at a time. And so the desire to be hidden, to hide myself, was replaced by, well, I'm not such a bad dude. As a matter of fact, I think I'm okay. So why don't I was always a movie fanatic. I was always a singer, but I sang to myself. Why not pursue what makes me happy without having to worry about people judging me. And it's an interesting story about this. If you have the time, I'll tell you. I studied with Mercedes Rule, who was a pretty famous movie actor, and she did a lot of work on Broadway. And we're in a class together at my acting studio, HB Studio, in the West Village in New York. Whenever there are new students, one of the exercises is they get up and they talk about themselves for 5 minutes, and then the students and the teacher, Mercedes, ask them questions. 7 out of 10 get up and talk about, at some level, even today, being either rejected or being nervous about sharing who they are with their family because of their sexuality. And if it's not about their sexuality, it's about some other part of themselves that they didn't feel good about and had to overcome through therapy. Or, I mean, I've heard stories where people have been institutionalized by their parents, not necessarily about, well, maybe it had something to do with their sexuality, but just listening to these younger acting students get up and talk about how their internal struggles have helped them, dealing with their internal struggles, overcoming their struggles has helped them become more creative and spurred them to want to perform and show others who they are.
So for you now, if you're looking back to that day in the grocery store, what would you tell that self, that part of you, about what's happening there?
First of all, you're not going to die. You're grow from this. And you're going to love who you are even more. In my case, it wasn't even more. You're going to love who you are versus hide who you are. So just stick with it. It's going to be a little bit of a rough road, but you're going to have a good life.
So what now for you, as far as, do you notice any other limiting beliefs or barriers that are preventing you from being who you are?
Oh, yeah, I still struggle with self-worth issues. I was comparing my performance or my singing, being very critical about it. Other people could tell me that was the most beautiful song I've ever heard you sing, and I'm like, ugh, I'm not happy with it. I should have held this note, or that was a great scene you did, or if I don't get a job, if I get a call back and I go and I audition again, but I don't get it, it's somehow my fault in my head. But the entertainment business, I mean, I've had successful actors tell me it has nothing to do with you. It's just they know what they want, and there's a look or a sound or whatever, and they're looking for that. It doesn't mean there's any part of you that's not worthy or broken or whatever. It's just, so stop thinking of that. It's not. So I still struggle with that. Yeah. But I think, a lot of people, I think all of us have a little some part of us that maybe as actors, we want to be seen, but we want to be perfect. Yeah. I don't know if it's possible to be perfect.
Oh, well said. What does a fully then integrated Don, one without the internal self-judgment, criticism, feel like for you right now? What would that look like?
Just another level of freedom, a higher level of freedom, acceptance of, not just my sexuality, and acceptance of who I am in my professional career in whatever stage it's at, or whether I'm busy or I'm not busy. That's not to say I certainly can't. I certainly can work harder at times, and being maybe a little bit more creative when it comes to finding work, but it doesn't mean that I'm not a good actor or I'm not a good singer, or, it just means maybe it's about acceptance. Yeah, maybe it's just accepting, feeling good with accepting things the way they are versus always wishing for things to be better.
Now, for those listening who might be struggling at a crossroads similar to your moment of realization, of acceptance, what would you tell someone going through what they're going through emotionally, cognitively, physically, and struggling with suppressing, not wanting to be seen, fear of rejection, being revealed, and really wanting to come out, really wanting to share, be themselves and who they are? You've worked on yourself a significant amount.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to know that they are who they're supposed to be. You are who you're supposed to be. You're perfect the way God made you. If you want to improve your life circumstances, work is always worth it. It's always worth it. There's peace of mind. Peace of mind is a real thing. It can happen for you. Level of inner peace is a real thing. It can happen to you. Inner peace. It's possible. It's going to happen for you. Find someone who can help you, therapist.
That's what I was going to ask you. What kind of concrete step, direction, what would...
I'm on the train a lot, the Long Island Railroad and the subways, and I've never seen this as much as I see it now. Public notices about feeling depressed. Call this 1-800 number, to find help. I would not be afraid. I would say, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call someone close to you and tell them how you're feeling and ask them to help you find help. And if that can't happen, pick up the phone and dial I don't know the specific numbers now in my head, but the self-help lines. And if you are gay and lesbian, or you're questioning and you feel like you need help through that, working through that, there's so many LGBTQ resources out there now that there weren't in my day. The gay men's health crisis. Here on Long Island, we even have an LGBTQ network that helps young people or older people who are dealing with their orientation. One other important thing is, for me, there was a point where I turned to alcohol to try to help me cope. And I know there's a lot of, when I was involved in program, so many young people, like in their teen years and coming in. And I think, that's another resource. It was really in AA that I came out. I was speaking at meetings, and then someone asked me to speak at a LGBTQ focused meeting. They have an AA, different types of meetings for special interest. And that was a big turning point for me, pivot point, feeling confident enough to get up and talk about how my struggle over my sexuality led to substance abuse. And it was really, working the steps and everything was really helpful to me in accepting myself for who I was. So I would say that's a huge resource for anyone who's either going through drug addiction or alcohol or issues.
Well said. Don, I want to take a moment really to thank you not only for being here, but for really sharing such a personal and vulnerable story. I know these moments are not easy to revisit for anyone, and your willingness to speak so openly is really an advantage that we have here. And to me and to listeners, to have this conversation, you've turned an experience of fear and collapse into one of insight and courage, and that honestly helps others find language for their own turning points. And the central truth I keep coming back to is both simple and pretty straightforward. You can't build a stable life on a rejected self. And Don, your story really brings that to life. You talk about and you show how change isn't about reinventing who you are. It's about really revealing what's always been there and letting go of what was never really yours. Maybe it's standing in the grocery store line, that moment where everything familiar suddenly feels like too much. Or maybe it's the quiet pause before you finally speak the truth that you've been carrying for years. Maybe it's that realization that survival and authenticity can't keep living separately as separate strategies. It just reminds me that pivot points oftentimes don't come like the way you describe it, like a dam bursting, but it kind of leaks out, and you're recognizing this. And when you stop negotiating with yourself and start listening to yourself, really listening, that's again where it points to the whole embracing of what's going on and not ignoring. And for anyone listening, even if they found themselves in a grocery store moment, shrinking, bargaining, or holding on to something and holding their breath and feeling like they're about to die because they thought they have a panic attack, maybe the pivot isn't about changing your circumstances, maybe it's about embracing and accepting and understanding oneself if that has an impact on them. And so, and this is, your story is so powerful and very telling, and your openness is just, I'm just struck by it and overcome by it. So I once again, I do want to thank you for spending time
Thank you
with
very
us
much.
here on
I'm honored that you asked me, and I'm pleased. I'm hopeful that it's going to help someone else. So thank you.
I can tell it will. Thank you again. And for all of you, I'm going to leave you with the one question that I always like to end every episode with. Think about it. What is your pivot point? What is your pivot point and your strategy for change?